It's a rather wet and damp Donington to kick off race day here for the British GT Championship's penultimate round of the season. And the fast lane is open for the warm-up session, this 15-minute period, which in theory won't affect the grid, not in terms of times, although if you get a penalty it might do. It does give the drivers and the teams, though, just another chance to explore the circuit, to make sure the cars are as they want them, and also to find out really what the grip levels might be like come 1 o'clock this afternoon when we go racing. Lots of heavy overnight rain. It's been drizzly this morning. It was pretty horrible and drizzly yesterday as well. And once more, the teams, if they wish to go out, are going to be on a bit of a learning curve to find out where the grip is going to be, where it is more slippery. If anything, this is a session really for the AMs to go and get a bit more experience. But there's a fair queue of cars at the end of the pit lane ready to go, headed by the Collard family Barwell run Lamborghini. Lots of others all waiting their turn in a very busy pit lane with GT3 and GT4 cars good to go. A 2-hour race today, and then one more round of the championship to come at Brands Hatch. We're getting towards the business end of proceedings now. And in GT3, Barwell Lamborghinis always go well around here. Those are the two cars at pit exit ready to go. David Addison and Joe Osborne. Trackside, Bryn Lucas down in the pit lane. Joe, in 15 minutes, you can't necessarily learn a lot here, but you could, if you get it wrong, do quite a lot of damage to your day.
Yeah, we've had a mixed weather for the last 4 days. The teams were here Thursday, testing relatively dry. Yesterday we had proper mixed with ending up slick session for qualifying, but still damp. The teams are probably hedging their bets that if the race in a few hours is like this, they need this data, they need their drivers, like you said, the AMs especially, to get their eye in. So there's a lot of risk for these cars. One accident here could mean that you don't race later, but if you don't attack warm-up, you might not be anywhere in the race anyway, so the jeopardy is high.
And am I right in saying this is more of a session for the AMs, or would you as a pro go out first, maybe just sort of set a benchmark setup of the car, not a time, but get the car where you think it should be in terms of the balance, the setup, then give it to the AM?
It's so difficult. The more laps the AMs do, the quicker they're going to get. But if the car's terrible setup, then, like you said, the pro should get in. It depends where you are in your window. In 15 minutes, you're not going to do a wholesale change. You're going to do tyre pressures, damper, and maybe ride heights. So you probably get in at the end as the pro to get a feed of it, speak to the engineer and say, if the conditions are like that for the race, I want X, Y, and Z different setup-wise.
The green flag is waved then. The car's making their way out onto the circuit. It looks better out of the window than it does on the pictures in terms of the spray that's hanging in the air. We're on the outside of the pit exit lane, just watching the McLarens go past the window and onto the circuit. In the background, you see the new to the championship Porsche from 2Cs, but in a very familiar livery that was the 1998 Le Mans 24 Hours colour scheme. There it is, Ian Logie and Phil Keane forsaking the Mercedes that they've driven this season to go Porsche. Not the first time we've seen Ian Logie in a Porsche, but it is the first time in British GT. He had a little dabble in Carrera Cup a couple of years ago. It's been a tough weekend so far for that ex-Team Parker Racing chassis. Rob Collard, in the meantime, behind the wheel of number 63, Alton Park winners. And he turns his way through Coppice. He's the first man out there. He's the pioneer to find out where the grip is. I have to say, it looks a lot wetter than I expected. Yeah,
the surface looks okay, doesn't it? No standing water. Just shows the downforce these cars are generating. The underfloor diffuser, the splitter, just sucking the air up. The air with the water, moisture there. Still able to use the curb. Alex Martin there. They'll be following Rob Collard because Rob is really one of the top AMs, especially in these conditions. His experience almost allow him to be overconfident. His car control then backs up, and then he just tends to wind it back a little bit. You see the doom and the gloom, the Aston Martins from Blackthorn there, just trying to find it. They were happy in the wet conditions that we did have yesterday. All of these guys flat out, and there's our GT4 pole sitter that is no more.
Indeed, because although the car on aggregate took the fastest time, a two-place grid drop given to that car because Jack Brown made a very late bail into the pit lane at the end of his part of qualifying, so he came across the white line, across the red paint, and it was deemed to not only be contrary to what the race director had told them at the briefing of how to get into the pit lane, but also unsafe. Had there been cars around, it could have been quite nasty. You could argue, had there been cars around, Jack Brown wouldn't have done the move, but they've appealed it. The appeal has been dismissed, and so quickest, but a two-place grid drop puts them onto the second row, because also bear in mind, a GT3 grid is ahead of GT4. We don't mix them up for safety reasons.
Yeah, 2 grid is kind of fair, but also harsh in equal measures. Maybe we'll go into that later in the race. But the problem is, being on pole in a wet race is infinitely better than a dry race. So if it does stay like this, being on the second row, the spray that will attract from the front 2 in GT4 will be a huge negative as we watch this Mercedes AMG of the Nearys. Sam putting in a mega lap at the end of qualifying on his last lap, second fastest in his session, but unfortunately his dad not so fast. They're right in the mid-pack at the start of this race.
Is Sam Neary another of those drivers that doesn't really get the credit he deserves? You know, the ABBA team is a bit of an underdog. It's an older car. They get in the old scrape, and they've had some bad luck and some accidents along the way. But actually, if you cut through all of that, they're both, but I'm focusing here on Sam, very quick drivers.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and he's comparing himself to the driver in shirt here, Maxi Gertz, Mercedes factory driver. So I agree with your statement, and I used to hate racing against Sam as well, which is always quite a nice tell if you respect someone's speed, because if you like racing against them, it's normally because they're quite slow and easy. Yeah. Every time I'd see Sam coming up, I'm like, oh, this is going to be an interesting dice. So, yeah, he's been on the scene a long time, considering his age, because he was in a GT3 car in his late teens. That's right, yeah. And I just think he probably now needs to get into Europe. He tried with Grasser, didn't he, in the Lamborghini? It went okay, not amazing, so he needs to kind of regroup. If he wants to go to that next stage of getting paid to race, you need to be on the stage, and that stage needs to be explored on a bigger front.
Well, as you look at the Barwell Lamborghinis, let's go to the pit lane. Martin Plowman has found Bryn Lucas.
Well, Martin, we woke up this morning, all of us looked out of our windows and saw rain, and that was very different. Yesterday was changeable, but it is tough out here in these conditions, isn't it?
Yeah, very tough. It's going to be a tough race today. The conditions are so variable. But we made some big changes since qualifying yesterday. You know, we felt that we've got a really good platform, but just weren't able to extract a good lap time. There's some elements I've left on the table with the driving, and then also we just needed a car that was a little bit more aggressive on new tyres. So we've gone through the data, made some changes for today, and hopefully it'll play out today.
You've got the difficult task, because we always know that you're running the team as well as driving as well, but you've got 2 different categories that you're looking after as well. How tricky is that from your perspective?
Yeah, on paper, it's very hard, but I'm very blessed that I've got a very good team around me, supporting me, and they allow me to switch off. You know, when I get here, I'll come here just as a driver, put the helmet on, but you do have to stop yourself from peering over around you and seeing what's going right or what's going wrong, and learning just to let the guys put the trust in them and let them deal with it.
Well, look, we wish you the very best as always. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you. Cheers.
And there, I'm afraid, is Mike Price. 6th quickest in the session is number 3 Mercedes. Mike Price at the wheel of it. That has had a moment coming into McLean's, and the back swaps ends. And how bad is the damage? That's a fair old impact. It's into the tyres, yes, but that is exactly what Joe was talking about earlier on. You don't want to do any damage at all in this session, and that is quite a whack. Yes, it's the tyre barriers, nothing solid. 97 is in the gravel, and that's triggered the red flag now. Andrew Howard at the wheel, and that is coming into the S's, so he's got that wrong. Presumably Joe under braking, and the back's overtaken the front. Yeah,
the green cars are cursed, aren't they, at the moment? But the Mike Price one was scary. That car should be starting 4th. Their best qualifying of the year in that Greystone Mercedes, and it is unacceptable. These are amateurs, so they're obviously going to make mistakes, but the mindset there has to be lower risk. Andrew Howard, I can forsake him that, because that is a low risk off. Yes, he's beached Dean in the gravel, but there's no damage done, and that's the risk reward. Let's have a look. Like you said, I think he's lost the rear. He hasn't touched the white line, goes into shot. It looked okay. I wonder at the end of the brake zone, did he just touch the white tyre, or did he turn in a bit aggressively? Front end coming round quite quickly, the gravel doing its job there, but that won't have any damage. So that's probably a 45-minute re-prep. The mechanics will take all the bodywork off, make sure there's no gravel there. But the Mike Price one, that's hit the wall pretty hard. Yes, the tyres, and it was square, but you've got to remember the tracking on these cars is so precise. We're talking of 1 millimetre of toe in on the rear, 3 on the front. So that's definitely tweaked something. Is that car going to be in its best position come start of the race at 1 o'clock this afternoon? Possibly, but like I said, it's not acceptable in these conditions. The risk versus reward balance has to be bang on.
Slightly quirky off that for Mike Price to the eye, because he was wrong coming into McLean. And Schwantz curve, yeah, okay, it is a corner, but it's you know, you're not necessarily running up to the white line. Let's have another look. But, you know, it's wrong from this point on, isn't it?
Yeah, I wonder if he's just hit the apex curb through the curve, and then the diff can just react very differently to how it does in the dry, and it might just spin up the inside that's touching that slippery curb, send the energy all the way through the differential into the right wheel, which then basically just locks it solid and gives you a drift car, which isn't exactly ideal doing 150 miles an hour on a wet Donington on a track. But yeah, you can see the speed is going, because the gravel didn't slow it down at all because the speed is so high, whereas Andrew Howard's one, the speed was probably a third to half the total VMAX at that point. But yeah, we've got, what, 9 minutes remaining. Peter Daly has stopped the clock, but I wonder if there's any tyre wall damage, if they're actually going to get back out with the timetable we've got today.
Yeah, indeed, and it might be that although the clock has stopped at 9.5 minutes, it's reset for the sake of a number to 6, just to give them a bit more time. It rather depends how long the clear-up operation is. The car doesn't look badly damaged on that side, but it's the other side of the green Mercedes we need to have a look at. Andrew Howard's car being hoiked out of the way as well, and we are currently under red flag conditions. No news as yet to a restart, but Peter Daly no doubt will give the teams as much track time as he can. But you're right, it is a pretty busy timetable today.
An interesting dynamic on that Grayson one was it getting pulled out. It looked okay, didn't it? It wasn't like bent down one side. As a team, you normally tell the driver not to drive back after being in the gravel. The gravel can get into the engine bay. If it gets underneath a belt and a pulley, you can basically blow the engine up because it loses oil pressure if it throws the belt. But I'd almost be tempted as a team to say, Mike, drive it back, see how it feels, and that will give us a great indication of is it okay. And even so, if the session goes back to green, they might just send it out. Bit of bodywork damage on the front right corner, but if it's safe, I would actually want to get Mike back out, because the next lap he's going to do otherwise is the start of the race.
It could have been a lot worse, couldn't it, that, in terms of the damage? And his co-driver is Callum McLeod. Well, what does he think about all of this? We'll find out. He's with Bryn.
Well, Callum, it's not what you want to see, is it, straight away in the warm-up? Take it easy out there, and that happens.
I mean, obviously it's not what you want to see, but in these conditions at Donington, it's very, very easily done. Mike's driven amazingly all weekend, which showed with his qualifying performance yesterday. So everything's still to play for. We'll get the car back, we'll assess the damage. The boys have done a brilliant job, so we'll get it repaired and we'll go from there.
You weren't in there with any headset on or anything like that, but have you heard what the damage is and what caused it?
No, don't know what the damage is. So I had my helmet on ready to get in the car. But, I mean, it went inside on, so I'd hope it's not too severe. But until the car's back, we won't know.
Your expectation is, fingers crossed, it will be ready to get out there a bit later on.
I'm sure it will be, yeah.
Thanks, Colin.
So there is Mike Price, as Joe was suggesting, driving it back. Yeah, OK, there's a bit of damage on that front right corner, but it could have been a lot worse. Mike and Donington don't necessarily go together all that well. We've had him upside down here in the past, around this part of the circuit. Yeah,
it was on the inside, just the path barrier behind him there. Yeah. The car's looking very Mad Mike, really, with Mike Price behind the wheel. But again, it looked level, a lot of bodywork damage. See, the door was caved in, as well as we look at Marco Signoretti there looking pretty chill. I actually think they will get that car back in a couple of minutes. I think we will go back to green. Andrew Howard's car has also now been recovered.
And the clock has been reset to 7 minutes. So we lose a little bit of time, but it's been reset. And the fast lane is open, although as it's deemed on the timing screen, the fats lane is open.
I don't know if that's aimed at anyone in particular, but it's a little bit harsh, isn't it, this early on in the morning. Optimum winning the race to get into that fats lane first, just by the skin of their teeth. By the looks at Barwell looking quite racy. This is also the last chance for these car controllers, the guys holding the lollipops, to get their eye in and release the car at the right point. It's very easy for them to go cautious and lose time in the pit stop, so they'll all be finding their marks as well. You can see the focus on the eyes of that car controller. He'll be looking down pit lane, looking when he can release at the last possible second.
So we'll be underway very shortly. But before we do get cars on track, let's hear from another Mercedes driver, Richard Neary with Bryn.
Well, Richard, we're looking at conditions. We're just in a red flag out there. For you, relief that it wasn't you.
Well, it's always relief when it's not you, isn't it? But yeah, no, I mean, in fairness, I've been praying for rain. We had a bit of a misstep in our qualifying and we're quite near the back of the grid. The rain suits us. We're both pretty quick in the rain, and the Merc's quite a good wet car, so I want it to carry on raining.
We know what you can do around this place. You've won here before as well, and we know what you like off the start too when it comes to a rolling start around here. So that's the hope, is it, that you can just get ahead early doors?
Yeah, well, the last time we won here, we were at the back of the grid as well, so we're looking for a repeat performance.
What about the car? Talk us a little bit about the car, what you've done to it over the last few months, because it's a different beast from what you had last year.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've just done a bit more testing with it and just tried to dial the car in a bit more. You know, we are running the car a bit differently, but I wouldn't want to explain that on TV.
And also, finally, yourself and Sam, you know, father-son pairing, we don't have many in British GT. We've got a bit further down the garage there. Sam's doing really well in other series too. It must be great for you to see that and also to race alongside him still.
Yeah, it's brilliant. I mean, I'm quite fortunate that Sam's quick, because in fairness, I'd be racing with him whether he was or he wasn't, but it just so happens that he is, so that makes it better.
So, expectations for today?
A win.
Of course, well done.
Why not?
Thanks, Richard.
A proper character is Richard Neary, and yes, as I said before, we've had that car in the walls on occasions, and he can be a bit fiery, but he's a good character to have in the championship, and he's quick too.
Yep, really, really good, and that's what British GT has been about for years and years. So it's great to see them as a family team still able to operate and beat some of these top international level teams. And I think it was a bit awkward that Bryn laughed when he said win, because I think he was being deadly serious there, and that is the kind of focus that Richard Neary has, and they are at the moment fastest in this warm-up. So Bryn, maybe you shouldn't have laughed in his face so aggressively.
Yeah, but Bryn and humour, you know. Through the S's, where it is still wet, still treacherous, slithers Sam Neary. Andrew Howard's car has just gone back out, incidentally, 97, and as far as I'm aware, it is still Andrew behind the wheel. We've got Mike Price's Mercedes in the pits while the damage is assessed, but if there is time to get him out to do at least a semi-flying lap, they may well take that opportunity. So the question was posed at the start of the session, what can you learn? Well, you can learn where the grip is and where you can and can't push, and a couple of people have just done so.
Yeah, and now everyone else that's out there will be slightly more on tenterhooks as we look at Mark Radcliffe in the 27 Optimum GT3 McLaren Evo. Mark has started the season so strong, did a lot of pre-season testing and racing to Deja Le Mans, so started off quick, and then he had that quite sizable accident, didn't he, at Silverstone during the 3-hour race. Not really a big mistake, but the consequences were big, and we haven't quite seen the best of him, and I think that car under Tom Gamble is very strong, so if they could just get Mark that tiny bit quicker, they would be really, really challenging for race wins every weekend.
We've got a couple of cars that are going to have to serve a drive-through penalty for being released before permission was given into the fast lane. It doesn't really affect what the session has in store. One of them is the number 69 Lotus that Nathan Harrison is currently behind the wheel thereof. And another car that's going to have to serve a drive-through will be, again, for the same reason. Lotus going back out. It's the number 16 Porsche Cayman that Josh Steed has just rejoined in. That's the other one that served a drive-through. Right, we've got 4 minutes still on the clock. And Sam Neary, the fastest, but now in the pits. Morgan Tilbrook, second fastest, number 77 McLaren. Carl Cavers, third, BMW number 22. You're looking here at Ed McDermott in the car that he shares with Matt Cowley. Ed McDermott, somebody else that has got better and better the more mileage he has in a race car. They've had, well, I said pretty rotten luck. You said awful luck or dreadful luck, I think, yesterday, but it's not been the season they wanted. When it all gels, that car goes well, but it's just been desperately short of good fortune.
Yeah, awfully rotten luck, probably has been that bad. But Matt Cowley, teammate there to Ed McDermott, fastest Mercedes in qualifying in the top 6 in his session. So I think they've obviously turned a bit of a corner pace-wise. And now if the luck can stay with them, I think they've got a good chance of what, maybe an overall podium, but definitely a Pro-Am podium in GT4. That DTO Ginetta as well has been quick since it's joined us mid-season. Did see those brakes glowing a lot yesterday in qualifying. You can see that release I'm talking about. That's going to be pretty tight with the Audi, but by the time they get to 40 kilometers an hour, the gap looks okay, and that's where the car controller's job is difficult. 3 minutes remaining, so all of these cars just cycling through a couple of last pit stop practices because there is so much time to be gained and lost.
Porsche fastest. We've not been able to say that much this weekend, but Phil Keane has gone to the top of the times. Now, in a sense, you might anticipate that because we haven't got that many of the pros against the AMs within GT3. But maybe that gives an impression that the Porsche is well suited to the wet rather than the sort of half and half of yesterday. Somebody else on a mission is Johnny Adam. So the two drivers tied on the most number of wins, 19 in British GT, are both on a very, very rapid lap with just 2 minutes and change on the clock.
Yeah, you're not 19 forever, are you? One of them's going to hopefully change it. Phil Keane improving. Phil Keane's such a Porsche nerd. He's actually poled by 992, which is obviously the model of that Porsche, the fourth one that he has raced in British GT now. Ricky Collard looking on. He looks like he's ready to get going there. Big late send on the brakes from Phil Keane there on Carl Cavers in that massive BMW. Ricky is looking at his dad, Rob Collard, there. Probably took the smile off his face as he looked like Phil was going to T-bone him at the Melbourne hairpin. But yeah, I think they're probably going to pit and do one last driver change in that car.
Yeah, because even that is part of what you can achieve in the warm-up session. It's not just about driving round, it's the pit lane processes as well. So through goes Phil Keane, and that lap is a 1:38.1. He's now quicker by 0.8 of a second because Morgan Tilbrook has gone quicker, and then Johnny Adam goes even faster. 44 thousandths now between Phil Keane and Johnny Adam. We've got a McLaren from GT4 parked on the grass.
Yeah, it just looks like it's obviously stopped. Doesn't look like there's any damage, no smoke. Race Lab been running that car for a couple of years now, so been on top of it, but there are only 2 McLaren Arturas on the grid now in GT4, so struggling a little bit with numbers. There were as much as 10 last year. So as we see Smalley now go fastest, 100th quicker than Phil Keane. The interesting one for me there was Rob Collard in front of Keane, did the lap just in front as we see the car pulling off, slowing down.
It's mechanical, isn't it?
There's something dripping, but is that just water that's being thrown up from the front wheel into the arch?
I think so, but clearly it's mechanical more than a malady.
Yeah, slight missing part of the brake light on the right-hand side there. You can see it doesn't go into the centre as much, but done a good job to get the car out of the way. But what my point was, Rob Collard was only 0.8 slower than Phil Keane at that point. We're used to the AMs being more like a second and a half in the dry, but again, that reiterates my point of Rob Collard being a top AM.
Yes, indeed, he's an AM plus, isn't he, or a pro minus, but Rob, very, very experienced, ex-oval racer, Formula Ford racer, Vectra Challenge racer, touring car racer for many, many years, and a British GT champion already, of course, back in 2020. There is the Adam Smalley, Sean Balfe, Silverstone winning McLaren that Adam Smalley, Carrera Cup GB champion last year, has now put to the top of the times over Phil Keane by 11 thousandths of a second. Adam Smalley in his first year of GT racing, I think he's had a pretty good introduction, both in World Challenge Europe Endurance Cup and in British GT.
Yeah, been super impressed. Haven't seen him put a foot wrong. Pace has been strong. You can see him dancing the car underneath the braking zone there. And when you jump from a car without ABS into a car with ABS that all these GT cars have, it is quite a big change in your style, that you're no longer really in control of how the car feels. You just mash it and use the ABS and let that deal with it. Same with the traction control on corner exit. So he's really adapted well.
Checkered flag out, session at an end. Adam Smalley goes through. That lap was slightly slower than his earlier best, but only by about 0.4 of a second. There are people still improving, doing personal or absolute best in the sectors. Bits of the racetrack looking a tad drier than they were, but who knows what the track surface is going to be like come 1 o'clock. There's a lot more racing to come. You never know what the weather gods have in store. As the GT4 Audi then heads up towards the timing line, that's the Tim Docker and Jordan Albert car, and Tim Docker improves up to 30th fastest with a very good lap. 3 personal bests. Number 18 Mercedes that Kevin Say qualified fastest in his group yesterday. Maxi Goetz 12th in that session.
Yeah, surprised they're not a little higher. Maybe just you get so few laps. You obviously saw a very heavily traffic affected lap there for Götz at the end. But yeah, as a driver, if you're in warm-up and you're not first, you just go, yeah, it's warm-up, I'm not bothered. But if you are first, you're like, well, we're going to win today. So you can use it there. But yeah, great job by Docker. That's how you want to finish warm-up with 3 personal best laps. As we see the 29 car, Tom Wrigley in the moment. Slight change on that car. We've seen it for the last 2 seasons, sponsored by the Barbers Collective, a great charity. It's now had a change of shift, still racing to save lives, but now with grassroots suicide prevention. So speaking to the drivers yesterday, another good app. You can download it. Young males, we know how many are lost to suicide, so it's a really great cause, and to get publicity like it, they've done a mega job for the last couple of years with that.
Here. So they've had a win as well, so it's a car that we'll be talking about no doubt during the course of the 2-hour race, being there or thereabouts. Remember that to equate the silvers against the Pro-Ams, there's an extra 24 seconds that the Silver Crews have to serve, and that will therefore balance things out over the course of 2 hours of racing. But at the end of warm-up, Adam Smalley sets the gun time ahead of Phil Keane and Johnny Adam, with Morgan Tilbrook 4th. Then Sam Neary from Rob Collard, Sandy Mitchell and Alex Martin 7th, looking for, in Sandy's case, a 3rd straight Donington win. 8th, Hugo Cook from Carl Cavers, and then Matt Topham. The best of the Pro-Ams in GT3, Phil Keane and Ian Loggy. The best of the Silver-Ams, Adam Smalley and Sean Balfe. And the best of those in GT4, the Lotus, Gordy Much and Ian Duggan for Mahiki Racing, ahead of the sister car of Nathan Harrison, and Stephen Lake, with Jack Brown and Zach Meakin's Optimum Run McLaren being third. Mike Price with a question mark then after the Mercedes charged the barriers up at McLean's, but fingers crossed that is going to be good to go for the penultimate round of the British GT Championship that will blast underway, all being well, at 1 o'clock this afternoon on the 2.5 mile Donington Park Grand Prix circuit. So cars returned to pit bunkers, and there the Alex Martin, Sandy Mitchell Lamborghini. The team goes to work to look at what needs to be done in advance of the race this afternoon. So the fastest car, Adam Smalley, Sean Bell, quickest in warm-up. It's going to be a fascinating 2-hour race. We'll see you before 1 o'clock then for all the action from Donington later in the day. Bye for now.